Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're continuing our Code Vein changes wishlist for 2019, and we're going to talk about the combat system of Code Vein this time, including things such as the focus system, the Ichor system, but also weapons in Code Vein. Now before I start, I just want to say a few things. As we know, Code Vein is releasing in 2019 with a lot of big titles around it. But in my opinion, I don't think there's a bad time to release a game like Code Vein, especially because it's a new IP. People always find time to play new games and other games. As long as they stand out and as long as they are good, they'll find time to play Code Vein as well. Now, the only problem with 2019 and Code Vein is that 2019 has 3 big titles that can be major problem for Code Vein, which are Sekiro, Neo 2, and The Surge 2. Which are all Souls-like games, in my opinion. I think Sekiro is kind of a Souls-like game, in my opinion. But yeah, so it's important for Code Vein to stand out in the middle of those games, and we don't even know if there are other Souls-like games that can come out in 2019. But anyways, moving on, I've also linked in the description below a document made by SunlightGreatsword, who is a very active person in my comment section and in the Code Vein Discord. So thank you a lot, SunlightGreatsword, for sharing this document, which is about changes that seem to be reasonable in my opinion. And if you are very interested in looking into changes that are reasonable, I would recommend you to read this document. It's a big document, but it's really worth it. So next, I've also linked in the description once again a video by Havian, who talks about the combat system of Code Vein and reveals things that I didn't know about myself. And I'm really glad this YouTuber made this video, and that's the reason why I'm linking it in the description below. So check it out if you're interested in the combat system of Code Vein, because we are going to talk about it in this video as well. So I went back and read some interviews that the game developers had with the medias, and they said that they didn't want Code Vein to be a game where the player would have their spirit broken and they wouldn't have the will to keep going. Well, I understand that they didn't want it to be as intense as Dark Souls necessarily, but then again, I don't even feel like Dark Souls is that intense at this point. But you know, they didn't want it to be too hard on the player, and they wanted them to keep going no matter what. Now that's why they have created a partner system in the game, and they also added things like the focus system in the game in order to help players to get through difficult challenge and all that stuff. Now that's the reason why I wanted the partner system to be an option more than something that was imposed on the player. And I'm saying that because at the E3 event, when they were asked about the partner system, they no longer said it was an option. Instead of that, they were kind of going around the question, and they were saying things like you can get your partner killed, instead of saying that you have the choice to not play with them. Yeah, like I said, I don't want that to be a thing. I want the partner to be an option, because Souls-like player, they like the difficulty, they like that sense of accomplishment, and they like to do things by themselves. They don't want to be helped, or they don't want their hand to be held by someone else and by this AI partner. Personally, I don't have anything against the AI partner. I like them. I like the NPCs. I'm curious to know how things will play for them in the story itself. But in my first run of Code Vein, I don't want them to be with me. I want to play the game by myself. Of course, as they said, they did mention that the AI partners will kind of affect the end of the game. Then again, I think they should have a neutral ending to the game if that's the case, so that as a player, if we play by ourselves and not with the AI at all times, then it will have this neutral ending, and then the other endings concern the AI partners that will have the game. But now let's talk about the focus system. Like I said, it's a system that has been designed to help the player in tough situations, and it's represented by this white gauge that is above the health bar, and it's supposed to fill up as you take damage or as you block attacks and dodge. And once it's filled up, you will enter this focus state that increases your attack, your movement speed, and also allows you to resist stagger a little bit more. But you're also allowed to use a launch attack at this point, and combo with a drain attack when you are in the focus state. Now I think it's a cool system. It's actually a really good addition to the Souls-like formula because it rewards players for dodging attacks and blocking attacks. The only problem is that I don't think it should necessarily reward the player for taking damage or for willingly throwing themselves into damage in order to reach the focus state. It doesn't make sense because taking damage in Dark Souls is a way to get punished actually, so you kind of get rewarded for getting punished. It doesn't make sense. It's really weird and I don't really understand the concept behind it. The only problem now is that if it no longer replenishes itself by taking damage, is that the enemies can no longer benefit from that system. In the first Code Vein livestream by Bandai Namco, well, the publishers, they said that developers wanted the enemies to feel like they were revenants themselves, because as we know, story-wise, the Lost are supposed to be revenants that has gone berserk. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense that the enemies that are supposed to be berserk are actually using a focus system. The focus system, if we have to meme about it, it's supposed to be something like the Ultra Instinct in Dragon Ball Super, and the Lost are kind of berserk, which are the Ozaru form for Dragon Ball in general, the gorilla form, if you know what I mean. It's the berserk form because it's the complete opposite. They are no longer focused, they are more about killing anything that moves around them. So I don't even think they should have the focus system. In order to make them feel more like other players or more like other revenants, I think they should have other things like the gift system, which they don't really have. At least it's very limited to some of them. But I'm not going to talk about the enemies in this video because it's going to take way too long to talk about them. So yeah, I think the focus system should no longer replenish itself by taking damage and should instead only reward the player when they are playing well or when they are being patient. That's only when the focus gauge should replenish itself. So next we're going to talk about the Ichor system, which is what makes Code Vein very unique in my opinion compared to any Souls-like game. Now I do have a problem with that system. So in the game there's a stat called Drain Rating, which is represented by a gauge below the Ichor points, and it fills up every time the player deals damage or blocks attacks, and then it recharges 1 Ichor point as soon as the gauge is filled up. Of course it doesn't add it to your maximum Ichor, but the problem with that is it allows normal weapons to drain Ichor, and it kind of makes Blood Veil weapons become more optional in my opinion. And there's an issue with that because blood veils are supposed to be the only weapons to be able to drain blood from enemies. So here are the changes that I would request for that system. I do not think the drain rating should necessarily change. I think it should still work the same, except it won't add the Ichor immediately. It said it will stock the Ichor like a temporary bank for 5 seconds, and it will only add it once a drain attack is used within the 5 seconds. Of course, it's important for the 5 seconds timer on the bank to reset every time an Ichor point is added to it. So basically, as soon as the drain rating gauge starts fading up, the player has 5 seconds to either stock another Ichor point into it or use a drain attack to receive every point that has been stuck, plus the drain attack itself. So what I mean by that is, if you have 1 Ichor point stuck in the bank, for example, and then you use the combo drain, you gain +2 Ichor, because 1 for the Ichor point that has been stuck in the bank and 1 for the combo drain, because combo drain gives +1 naturally. Now on the other end, if the player uses a full charge drain, for example, they will get +3, because 1 for the Ichor point in the bank once again, but +2 because charge drain gives +2 naturally. Now in an IGN interview, the developers said they wanted the player to choose the way they would play the game, and I can understand that they didn't want to force the blood veil on the players. However, I don't think they should really care about people who would dislike that system, because it is the same as people who would say they would like to play Neo without key pulls. Otherwise, it would mean they are just wasting time designing the whole thing for people who just don't want to play the game in general. So next we're going to talk about the gift, but this one is not necessarily a big change or a necessary change in my opinion. I think it's just something that would be a good addition to their system. So for example, looking back at the first build of the game or the early stage of Code Vein, there was a gift that was like a giant fireball, and I'll just call it fireball because that's how I know it. But yeah, so that fireball had a unique animation that has been replaced by the Sonic Arrow animation. In fact, a lot of animations has been replaced by the Sonic Arrow animation for many gifts now, and I think it's kind of a waste because that animation wasn't that bad. It was kind of slow, of course, but it was because back in the days they had a casting time on every gift, but now that they have removed it, I think it would be nice to bring that animation back. But it would be also nice to add a recoil effect to it because it is a giant projectile. In the E3 build, they have revealed a gift that is kind of the ice variant of the fireball. I think it would be also nice that it had the same animation but with that recoil effect as well. There was also a gift called Aurora Flash, which is a gift that summons an ice blade and has a melee hitbox to it. The only problem with that is your character has to be in front of the enemy in order to hit, and I thought it would be nice to add a dash, a small dash to it, so that you have more reach. It will actually allow your character to move forward while using it. So the idea here is just to separate gift with some animations. So for example, if you have a small projectile like Sonic Arrow or Fire Lily, it would use the same animation as Sonic Arrow, and if you have a giant projectile, you will have that recoil effect to it. Now if you have a melee type of gift, it would have a forward dash, which means your character will be more engaged in the fight. Now let's talk about something that is a little bit more interesting in my opinion, the weapons in Code Vein, starting with something quite simple, which is the weapon's second slot. So I don't really understand the purpose of the second slot in Code Vein. In other Souls-like games, generally the other slots are occupied by things such as a secondary weapon, talismans for the buffs for miracles in Dark Souls, and also for dual wielding. In a game like Code Vein, I'm not quite sure what is the use of that second slot, because not only the game doesn't have PvP, but also the other weapons, like range weapons like the rifle or the bayonet, if you want to say it like that, is quite useless because there is already a gift that can draw aggro from enemies, which is called Sonic Arrow. So the rifle doesn't really has a particular use because Sonic Arrow is already a gift that is accessible to every build in Code Vein. It doesn't have a particular requirement. So I thought it would be nice if every weapon in Code Vein had a buff or an effect to it, so that it would act like a piece of gear, since Code Vein doesn't offer a gear system. So weapon slots would probably act like something like the ring system in like the rings slots in Dark Souls, where you can equip every ring and they all give you effects. So it would be the same Code Vein as to where you equip a main weapon and a secondary weapon, but you receive all the effects from those slots. It doesn't matter if one is used as a main weapon or as a secondary weapon. Both slots will provide you the effects. Of course, the limitation being you receive the effects as long as you meet the stat requirement for that weapon, and it also affects your total weight. Having it affect your total weight will also balance things around, as it will make you slower during the game. So for example, if you equip the halberd as a main weapon and a greatsword as a secondary weapon, let's say that the halberd provides a bonus attack damage, and let's say the greatsword in your secondary slot will provide, I don't know, poison resistance for example. So poison resistance on the greatsword and bonus attack damage on the halberd, you receive both effects as long as you meet the stat requirement for both of these weapons. Next we have attack stages, which is a weird concept in Code Vein, and to explain them it's a little bit weird and a little bit technical, but attack stages is kind of the concept as where your weapon will have let's say has a 3 attack combo. For example, you press square 3 times and it will do 3 different types of attacks, or 3 attacks that seem to be similar but belong to the same string. So in Code Vein they have attack stages, and it's a concept that doesn't make sense as Code Vein is a Souls-like game. The point of attack stages is that at the there's one attack that marks the beginning of the combo, and the last attack marks the end of the combo, and because it is the end of the combo, there is a cooldown before your character would be able to attack once again with the same combo. So it's a concept that belongs more into into fast-paced hack and slash games, or combo games, I would say, like Devil May Cry, even God Eater, or things like Nier Automata or something like that. So in Code Vein it doesn't make sense, because the only thing that should mark the end of your combo is your stamina. And there's also a problem with the attack stages in Code Vein, as they have different hitboxes and make your attacks less consistent. Let's assume that I am a halberd main, I play halberds only, and I have, let's say, 2 enemies in front of me, and I'm kind of in a bad position because my health is really low. So let's assume I'm playing with my halberd and I try to fight these 2 enemies with my halberd, and I start swinging. The first swing of the halberd in Code Vein is a horizontal hitbox, so it's fine, both enemies will get hit at that point. The second attack is also a similar hitbox as the first one, but the third attack is a downward swing. And the problem with a downward swing, it means that my attack will only hit one of the enemies, and in order to not use that attack and to use another horizontal attack, I have to wait. I have to fall back after my 2 first attack before I'm able to go back with another attack. Problem being, my enemies would probably start preparing an attack while I'm waiting, and because the halberd is not really a fast weapon, it takes a little bit of time before I'm able to land another hit. So I will probably die between that half second that will pass when I'm falling back in order to reuse a horizontal swing. So like I said, the attack strings and the attack stages kind of make the game and the combat less consistent and less responsive than a game like Dark Souls, because the concept of attack stages doesn't make sense in this type of game. I think what they should do, they should change them to make at least every stage similar to one to another. For example, in Neo does use attack stages as well, but every stage uses the same type of hitbox and also the same timing. The only thing that changes in Neo is the animation. So it's important for Code Vein to have consistent hits when you use a particular type of attack. So the weak attacks precisely need to all have the same hitbox, the same timing, but different animation if they want. Next, I also wanted to talk about the stamina in Code Vein, and it's kind of weird because in Dark Souls my character is level 170 with 35 endurance, and I can swing a Ultra Greatsword 4 times, I can swing a Street Sword 7 times before I run out of stamina. And in Code Vein I've seen that people can swing a Longsword, which is the one-hand sword, 8 times before they run out of stamina, and they can swing the Greatsword 4 times just like I swing my Ultra Greatsword 4 times as well. So I'm not really sure what this is about, but I feel like they might have to reduce the stamina or increase stamina consumption from the weapons, because from what I see in Code Vein there's no sort of stamina management. In fact, in every footage that I've seen, there has never been a moment where people try to manage their stamina correctly. It seems like the game kind of encourages people to actually attack without minding their stamina. So I'm not really sure if that's a good thing. They might have to reduce the stamina or increase stamina consumption, as I say, but once again, it might be because the demo has been designed that way. It might not be accurate to what the full game experience will be. But anyways, I just felt like I had to say that because Stamina management is really important in Souls-like games, and it's really what makes them good and different from other hack and slash games. So there are also some issues with the animations in Code Vein, but this might be probably the biggest challenge for Code Vein. Probably might be the thing that Code might has to change the most, and that is the animation. But just for this case, I'm going to talk only about the animation of the hammer, because the hammer is probably the weapon with the least interesting animation, I would say. Like, the other weapons are okay, they are kind of alright. They could be, their animations could be better, but I would say the hammer is probably the worst case of animation I've seen in Code Vein. And I think they should really change that. They should change something similar to the Kirk hammer in Bloodborne. People have been comparing it to that, and also they could also use some animations that are quite similar to what God Eater 3 is doing with the Heavy Moon, which is the kind of axe god arc. So they can do that, but I just feel like they need to work a little bit more on the animation. And like I said, this is probably the biggest issue in Code Vein, and the animations in general of the entire game. Like, I think the cutscenes maybe look nice, but in the game itself, a lot of things look a little bit off, at the exception of the blood fields that are pretty good. Then again, there might be some things that can be done better, but I feel like the blood veil animations are pretty cool. There's also an issue with the block animation of the greatsword. So normally when the character holds the greatsword, they hold it in their right hand, but when you block with the greatsword moves from the right hand to the left hand. So that is a minor issue that they have to fix, and that was reported in the document that I've linked in the comment section. So yeah, next I also want to introduce some changes concerning the Bayonet, which is a very cool concept of a weapon in Code Vein. And at first I thought it would be the most interesting weapon in the game, but looking back at it again, I'm more interested in the halberd and the greatsword when I think about it. And it's kind of a disappointment because the Bayonet is the only weapon that uses Ichor and that can scale with magic abilities. So here are the changes that I propose for the Bayonet. Of course, keep in mind that this is just my opinion, and this is probably a change that might not happen, even though I would like to see it. So first of all, I'd say it would be nice to increase the shot range of the rifle and increase the fire rate as well. Also remove auto aim, replace the guard ability, which is on the L1 key on the PS4 controller. So replace the guard by the ability to aim, so to free aim like in any other shooter, and then shoot with R1. R1 is not really a key that really works for anything. Code Vein, it's more of a function. You sprint with R1, you use your launch attack with R1 and triangle, I think, and you also use combo drain with R1 and X. So in this case, you would hold L1 and shoot with R1. It would be like L1 plus R1 to shoot. Also change the bullet visual effect. I did say that, I did mention that in the previous video, and also the sound effect as well, because I didn't really like the visual, the big beam, red beam that covers the screen, and the sound effect of the shot. It was really, like I said, it was really unpleasant to me. And also use triangle and X for light and heavy attacks like any other weapon, but actually change the attack animations of the Bayonet by thrusting attacks. From what I see, it uses a lot of slashing attacks. It doesn't really make sense because a bayonet is designed to stab, not to slash an enemy. Sometimes they are designed with knives, and not always swords, but just really short knives that are designed to stab an enemy from a distance. They kind of work like spears if you want. Next, I would also recommend to increase the attack speed and make it the fastest weapon in Code Vein, and that consumes the least amount of stamina as well. And finally change the attack stages to 2 instead of 4, because right now the attack stage of the Bayonet right now is 4 stage, and I don't think 4 is required for this weapon. I think, like I say, it works more like a spear, a short spear, and it should be only used to stab enemies, and just 2 quick stabs would be more than enough on the light attack. Also, it would be nice to reduce the damage on it, since it's the shortest blade that the game has to offer. So like I say, I thought the Bayonet was a nice weapon, but looking back at it, it's just a sword with a range option and nothing more than that. So the pros of the changes is that it makes it play more like a regular traditional rifle in any game, in any shooter I should say. And also the visual effect will be less distracting. It will also be very effective for long range assassination, since you can now aim on enemies and also shoot from far away. Also, because of the melee attack speed, it makes it more effective with the drain rating system that I've talked about, and it makes it more effective with combo drains, meaning that it will be probably the weapon with the highest draining capacity of the game. Now, the cons of the change is that the shots can miss. It burns Ichor faster due to the fire rate, and you cannot block anymore with that weapon. And also your melee damage is kind of low. Now it kind of makes sense that you cannot block with a bayonet. I mean, it's a very tiny piece of metal, and you're going up against things that have giant swords, giant hammers, and it doesn't really make sense to block anyways. Mobility wise, it should be more like Bloodborne should really offer you the ability to get out of this shooting stance, because right now, for what it is in Code Vein, when you shoot with the bayonet, your character stands still, you cannot move, and also there's a tiny recovery frames which makes it a little bit long, so that you cannot shoot once again or do any action until your character puts down the rifle. So it's kind of underwhelming in that sense. Now, I know that a game like Bloodborne uses auto aims, but the firearms in Bloodborne are much faster, and they are also used for parrying, and they are very important in PvP because they interrupt the movement in PvP, because Bloodborne has a lot of mobility into it, and the firearms are really important in that game for that reason. So finally, this is the last part of the video, and this change, well, it might be really kind of difficult for them to do that. It might not happen in the game, so I would request to add more types of weapons. Something that people have been complaining about is that the game kind of lacks weapons, and the weapons that we've seen in the game are not quite different from one to another. Like, you can see the greatsword, and you can see the hammer and the halberd, and they kind of have all the same properties. Like, they all hit multiple enemies at the same time, they are all kind of heavy, and they are all meant to stagger the enemies. Of course, it's different in the attack speed and maybe the stamina consumption, but in the use it's kind of the same thing. You use them in the same context. But anyways, adding new weapons would be really nice. I've seen a lot of people actually asking for things like twin blades, sights, and a little bit about gauntlets, like combat gauntlets, which personally I think would be really awesome. I would really love to have combat gauntlets in this game. But yeah, so if they ever had to add twin blades, I would say twin blades, they would probably have one of the highest attack speed in the game, and probably a weak block, which is a weak defense stat, but they will also have a good reach because they will have the character to be more engaged in the fight. And if they had to make gauntlets, I would say it would be a short reach, medium speed, and high defense stat, probably more for a strength based weapon. And when it comes to twin blades, they will be more dexterity weapons. Now for the sights, I think they might have sights in the game, and they might belong to the halberd category. The only thing that I really hope to see is that there is more than one sight in the game, and also I hope they feel very unique compared to all the other halberds that exist in the game. But yeah, so like I say, it's less probable to happen, even though I hope it will. I hope because it would be really cool if they could do that, but I don't think it will be the case. But anyways, this is all that I had to say. This was a really long video. I think this might be my longest video ever so far, but yeah, this is all that I have to say for now. Thank you all so much for watching. Like I said, check out the Havian video that I posted in the comment section, and also the document that was posted by SunlightGreatsword. It's all really cool pieces of stuff that we can see for changes in to understand combat system even more in Code Vein. But yeah, so anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. The next video will probably be about the enemies.